Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Stardrive? This is my first impressions of the Stardrive beta version 1.06T, as you can see down at the bottom there. This beta is currently available if you happen to pre-order the game, or if Zero Sum Games, the guys over at Zero Sum Games, sent it to you. I'd say the guys over at Zero Sum Games, that's actually a little bit incorrect. The guy over at Zero Sum Games. Zero Sum is run by a single individual, and supposedly he quit his job as a lawyer in order to make Stardrive. Now, I cannot imagine he actually made everything himself. Like, he must have outsourced the art or the music or something like that. If he didn't, he's some kind of gaming Superman, a development Ubermensch. It's a little bit scary. But I would imagine that that's what he did. If it's anything like Cliff Harris from Positech Games, who farms out his artwork to somebody else in order to get that done, then, you know, it kind of makes sense. What is it? Well, it's described as an action 4X. So, 4X strategy, as you should be aware, you're looking at stuff like Civilization, Master of Orion, the 4 X's, which I never remember. Explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. And that's EX. That's where the X's come from. If the game does not have those, then it is not a 4X game. However, the traditional 4X model has become somewhat warped in recent years, mostly because there haven't been all that many games in it. The ones that have not necessarily been all that good. Some people point to Sins of a Solar Empire as a really good 4X game. In reality, a lot of what makes a 4X is not in Sins of a Solar Empire. And it's actually a fairly simple game, but nonetheless a very enjoyable space RTS. The question is Stardrive more of a 4X game? Well, we will find out. So I'm going to do two things in this video. The first thing is I'm going to take you into a new game, because I'm going to show you race design, as well as the basics of how the game actually operates. Then I'll load into a game that's a little bit more advanced. The problem with loading into a game that's more advanced is that currently this game is still in beta, and it has some fairly serious performance problems at late game. Massive stuttering, frame rate loss, freezes, all sorts of things like that. And there don't appear to be any particular solutions on the Stardrive forums to actually fixing that, and there are widespread reports of it. So, I don't know how much of the endgame I can really show you without the game either freezing or crashing. It is still in beta, but it is going to be out in just over a month, so he doesn't have a lot of time to fix this kind of stuff, and I would hope that that's the priority. Before we go on, we'll check the options menu. Not really a lot to see here. You can turn limit game speed on or off. I don't really see the point in limiting and actually enabling this because it is optional anyway. Maybe it affects the performance, maybe it doesn't. Obviously, if you crank it up to really high speeds, it's going to slow down horribly. Ironically enough, I know, but there you go. Okay. So let's go into new game and let's figure out what's going on here. But before we do that, I should highlight this. This is perhaps the most important function of this particular game. The fact that there is clear modding availability from the get-go. The modders tools have been available to everyone since the beta began, which is pretty ridiculous. What that means is that if it's a good base game, then you have all sorts of opportunities for some really awesome modifications. Question is, of course, is it any good at the base? Let's find out. Okay, going to new game. So, very much in the 4X style, you have the Design Your Race feature. This allows you to use a points-based system up to 10 points in total with positives and negatives to build a race. And you base your race on one of 8 existing races, including Space Bears. These are not just Space Bears, these are Japanese Space Bears. Very much samurai Space Bears. That is a plant of some description. These guys are basically Cthulhu or Cthulhuites. Wolfar. Dreylox, Cordrazine, humans. The Cordrazine are particularly amusing because they control a race of slave Owlocks that look like that, and they plug them into an interface and they control them. It's really quite amusing. Some of these races are actually based on races that you might remember from a game by the name of Master of Orion 2. Yup. The Dreylox and the Orlocks, for instance, these are fairly recognizable. The Owlocks, I believe, are a parody on the Orlocks. The Kulrathi are very similar to the Bullrathi, except the Bullrathi were, you know, cows. And a few of these other races are fairly similar as well, if I recall correctly. So that's pretty interesting. A few little nods here and there. In fact, there's actually quite a lot of nods to Master of Orion 2, which is good. You know, nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you're going to make nods to any 4X game, you should probably make it to that one. So let's design a race. Okay. So, as regards to which one of these you pick, I suppose it really depends on what you like the look of. My last game was actually being played with the Volfar, but I found with those, for some reason, their ultimate ship doesn't seem to work. I don't really know why that is. We could build Kulrathi, humans, Dreylock, Cordrazine. They all look pretty cool. Let's build them around the Cordrazine ships, shall we? Actually, no, because I want to interact with these guys so I can show you the owls, because they're pretty funny. Alright, so these are, as you can see, the default statistics available for each of these races. And we can have a look at that and try and figure out, do we want to stick with that? Stick with the Dreylock? Do we want to go alluring, smart, and duplicitous, or do we want to think about something else? Well, we can easily eliminate... Well, I say easily. There's actually no clear button for some reason. That would be nice. We can eliminate those particular positive traits, and then we have 8 points to spend. I thought it used to be 10. Apparently not. So, 8 points to spend, and you can also pick negatives, as you can see here. Now, these will hamper your race in some way, but they allow you to grab some other points in other areas, which is always good. So what do we want? Well, there are 3 sets here: physical, sociological, and history and tradition. I love astronomers. Astronomers is awesome because it shows the closest 20 star systems fully explored, which means you can immediately expand to some really nice worlds right off the bat without having to worry too much about where you're going. A huge homeworld is always nice. If you want a really good base, then having a big, rich homeworld is always nice to start with. Pack mentality is actually kind of ridiculous. If you are playing a race where you're building a lot of smaller ships, kind of swarming, you can get a huge boost. In fact, my previous game that I played, I dominated the galaxy using the basic starting ship and just building so many of them with that pack mentality buff that you became absolutely monstrous. There's a few little things here and there, like prototype flagship, so if you want to start with a big stompy ship at the start, you can do that. I also like stealing. My previous game involved a lot of stealing stuff from other races. Let's go on mercantile. The reason I want to go mercantile is because the way that I generally set my colonies up, I have a lot of freighters going backwards and forwards, and if you have that, this is a great way to earn some money. Now, I might also want to grab meticulous if possible, because that's really nice. It's only 1 point. The question is, where will I get it? Well, let's grab timid. We're not going to be good ground fighters with these guys. We're going to rely on a little bit of economic dominance, I think. So we're going to grab meticulous, and I don't think there's any other... Oh yeah, there is. We can grab prototype flagship as well. There we go. That'll be nice, because I can show you a little bit of a bigger ship with some interesting guns on it. Alright, that sounds like a good race. Cool. So you can also customize this as well. We go to normal size galaxy, abundant, crowded, rare, uncommon, and normal solar systems. Customize the number of opponents. I think 4 is a reasonable number. 7 gets a little bit crowded. And then you've got, this is just sandbox game mode. I assume there are going to be more later down the line. And then you can also customize the game's pace. So if you want a really, really fast game, all the way up to 400% pacing if you so desire. Actually, that's the other way around. 100% is actually the quickest. Huh, there you go. Let's get back here. There we go. Difficulty. Normal, hard, brutal. Normal, I think it might be a little bit too easy, actually. And I based that on my previous game of just kind of slapping everybody about, but we'll stick on this for the time being just for demonstration purposes. There's also rule options. These are for experimental rules. This one, gravity wells, means that you can't warp while within a planetary gravity well. This actually has a number of different effects. It makes it harder to run away if you engage in a fight. It also means that if you are using a lot of freighters, it's actually a gigantic pain in the ass because it takes ages for your freighter to get out the planetary gravity well, so it nerfs them significantly. We'll leave that off for the time being. Alright, cool. We're all pretty much set up. The last thing, of course, to do would be to name the race. We don't want to be called the Dreylock Council. Absolutely not. Our Empire name will be... I don't want to type the Cynical Fleet because it's going to be seen as endorsing fandom, and you know I hate that. Archmage of the entire frickin' universe. It fits. Wonderful. We are the Archmages. We're the Archmage, and these are the Archmagus, perhaps. Our homeworld system will be called Angbadang. I'm a horrible person, I know. And then you can pick your flag and so on and so forth. That one looks a bit 40k-ish. Let's go with that. Alright, engage. Let's rock and roll, shall we? Into the galaxy we go. Alright. Pause the game and show you what's going on. So you can zoom out here. It uses the Kind of Sins of a Solar Empire-esque notion of zooming in and out. You hold down control, you can go maximum zoom one way or the other. That is my starting system, Angbadang. Now, let's go through the interface. To start with, the interface is really damn small because it doesn't really scale all that well on higher resolutions. That might be something they may want to change. I say they, he might want to change. So, here we go. Research at the top. As you might expect, research stuff. This is your economic overview. It tells you where your money's going. You can change your tax rate. In this game, tax rate does not make people unhappy. The only thing that makes people unhappy is being in the negative. If they're in the negative, it increases rebellion chance. You can go up to 100% tax rate if you want, but if you do, you're not going to be producing anything. All tax rate really does in this game is convert production and research to money. It's really as simple as that. So you're probably going to have less economic issues in this particular game than you would in other Forex games. Shipyard. This is actually a key component of the game. I'll show you this in a little bit. And that allows you to design ships in a modular fashion. It's actually kind of hardcore. Empire gives you an overview of your current places. Angbadang 3 is my homeworld, as you can see here. It is a Terran planet. This is what's on it. In fact, I think if we double-click that, it will take us directly to the planet colony overview, which will show you the available tiles, which can contain buildings, troops, and other things like that. Diplomacy is exactly what you would expect. This is where your agents and espionage exists. You can get agents in order to do all manner of skullduggery. Archmage of the entire freaking universe right there. And then once I've discovered the other races, I will find them there as well. And that is, for the most part, what you need to know, with the exception of these buttons down here. It took me a while to actually discover these. These buttons have a number of different uses. Zoom to your currently selected flagship, which is this. Currently called the Perseverance, which this will not happen. You can't put special characters in your names, which is really annoying. That means I can't put in the SS arse or whatever, I don't know. Although you can do some special characters, but not all of them. You can do dashes, but you can't do dots. I don't know why that is. The SS Disaster, which is most likely what the Space Empire is going to end up being. Other stuff down here, zoom out to galaxy view, open deep space building, which allows you to build platforms, which are quite useful. List of all known planets is done right here. This is kind of handy. This is all of the stuff that I know. This makes it ridiculously easy to figure out where you want to colonize, because you've got fertility and richness here. These are two very important statistics. They will describe to you exactly how good everything is. If I want what's the richest place? The richest place appears to be this. It's at 4.9 richness rating. That is pretty hardcore. Going to be difficult to colonize because it's a desert, but it's definitely worthwhile. So the first thing we might do is actually immediately say, oi, colonize. And what that's going to do is it's going to end up building a colony ship and sending it directly out there to attempt to colonize it. What's probably going to happen, however, is that we're going to run into some unpleasant individuals. This game is kind of stacked full of those, especially when it comes down to taking new planets. A lot of the planets near to you are defended by a race called the Remnant. The Remnant are sort of NPCs. They can be scavenged for ancient technology, and apparently there's a storyline built into them as well. So kind of like the Orions in Master of Orion to some degree. Alright, so how do you move stuff around in this game? Fairly easy. In the case of this ship, if I wanted to move there, I'm going to give it an order, and it's going to go and do just that. In the meantime, what I'm going to tell this ship to do is go and explore the galaxy on its own. That's a scout ship, and then I have my colonizer that's heading in that general direction. The SS Disaster is turning around here. Interestingly enough, a feature that doesn't really make a huge amount of sense is that I actually can directly control this ship. You can assume direct control, of any ship you wish, and you can kind of maneuver it yourself. This is fairly important if you have a really big flagship that you don't want the AI to take control of. You can move it around, you can take hits on different sides. It actually simulates that, which is pretty cool, and also the overall design of the ship is fairly important. This view right here, I'll actually show you a module view. This is all in green right now. If this side of the ship were to take damage, modules on this side would start to go offline. So it's a fairly intricate and in-depth simulation of damage. Admittedly, it's fairly hard to control en masse in a large furball. Alright, let's research. So, research trees. There are 6 available. There is a 7th one unlocked once you destroy some remnant stuff called the Secrets tree. And research works in exactly the same way as most 4X. You can, however, queue up to pretty much as you want, I think. So I want to go all the way up to assimilation, which is a very, very high piece of technology. I can click that, and it's going to select everything that requires me to get there. Those are the tech trees. Maybe not as many as you might think. Like, I think the game perhaps lacks a little bit of technology. It would be nice to see some more development there. And as a direct result, you've got some weapons which appear like they would be way more in-depth than they actually are. But considering the rate of research that you often get, there's actually more to it than you might think. I spent a good probably 8 or 9 hours over the weekend hammering away on this one particular game, and I got quite a lot of this done, but not all of it. Like, most of these energy weapons I didn't even touch. Some of this stuff is really expensive. Quantum torpedo cannons. The only energy cannon stuff I got was up to here, so all of this stuff I didn't get. I didn't get the heavy shielding. I was missing a lot of the physics stuff as well. I'd only just finished Titan construction, but I was missing all of these fighters and stuff. So it does take a while. Admittedly, I wasn't a research-focused race. I was mostly stealing all my stuff, so I don't know just how true that really is. But I would never argue against having lots and lots of technology as long as it's well set out. If you were to look at something like Sins of a Solar Empire, that does research in a really bad way, because if you don't already know the tech tree inside out, you have no idea what you're doing. It's really complicated. This is not complicated at all. Thankfully, a lot of these names actually make sense as well, which is more than I could say for Endless Space, which had some bizarre names for pretty much everything. And it's very, very easy to see what everything does. Xenomining, it unlocks this item. So the benefit of each research is to the right here. So maybe it's going to be an upgrade, like this. Xenogenetics means 25% increase in population growth, but I can also build a genetics lab. These are buildings and pieces of technology and modules that I can put on, and these are upgrades. So it's really easy to understand. It's actually nicely laid out, and most of it makes sense. I mean, it's hard to tell what the difference would be between, say, physics and space weapons, because some of these are also space weapons. Why are these here, and yet these here? And then energy, these are also space weapons. I would think it would make more sense to divide it down into stuff like weapons, modules, buildings, and so on and so forth. But that's not how the guy decided to do it. That said, again, it's not a big complaint. It's not that hard to actually figure out. Alright, what do we want to research first? Now that's a tricky one. I usually like to go straight for biospheres. The reason I want to do that is because, first, it gets me an aeroponic farm. Very, very useful. +1 flat increase in food production. Makes things easier. And biospheres allows me to create habitats on hostile worlds. So we're going to start that immediately. This is what I like to do, and then I usually like to grab industrial foundations. I find that the basic fighter ships are usually good enough to deal with pretty much anything from the start. Now, it's a 4X game, so, you know, the original setup of everything does take some time. I've got this paused while I'm doing this, so I'm not losing any time here. This game is in real time, by the way, even though it refers to turns. The turns basically take a certain amount of in-game seconds, so that's how we set it up, which makes sense. I think that's a good way of doing things. Alright, the colony screen. This stuff right here is all buildable. This stuff isn't. This is uninhabitable land. If I get biospheres in these areas, then I will be able to have more people live there. And I will also be able to construct things. Right now, there are no buildings that I can really construct that I don't already have. I've got a spaceport and my capital city by default. The capital city can actually fight in ground combat, or you can build infantry units. Unlike a lot of games like this, it does actually simulate ground combat. It even lets you control it if you want. Personally, I've never really found any need to. Usually just throwing enough troops at the enemy will do the job. So that's not really a big deal. Now, you can also build ships here. So these are the default ships. Transporters, colonizers. This will start to build a colonizer as soon as I decide to press colonize on a world. So I don't even need to build these ahead of time unless I'm really rushing for a particular area. Scouts and fighters, always useful. In fact, we can go and check out the ship design screen right now. So this is what a very small ship looks like in this game. This is a very, very small ship. And you can... I'll show you a bigger one later on. You can see these squares here are module spaces. And each of these is an item. So this is a nuclear reactor. This powers the whole craft. So if I wanted to look at that here, I'd see here are the power plants that I currently have available. That's a nuclear reactor. That's a medium nuclear reactor. That takes 4 squares. Better for bigger ships. Don't want it on this one. Engines. Small warp engine and small engine. You put both of these on here because the engine gives it a lot more turn rate, whereas the warp engine gives it a lot more warp factor. You put both on, and it's a nice little best of both worlds kind of scenario. Ordnance storage. This game actually simulates the notion that firing stuff takes ammo, which is interesting. There's two types of weapons, ordnance-based weaponry, as well as energy-based weaponry. Energy just takes power, that recharges. Ordnance-based weaponry, that takes bullets, takes ordnance. These are stored in modules. You get a little bit of default storage with each weapon, but it's pretty rubbish. So you want to consider getting some storage here. Interestingly enough, each of the races actually has a different setup in terms of their spacecraft. So the Wisp fighter hull looks and has a different shape and different module spaces to a fighter from a different race, which is intriguing. This one's a very wide ship. A lot of the other ones very tall, very narrow. That's the cockpit there, and so on and so forth. So designing a ship is actually kind of one of the big parts of this game. Let's say I wanted to build a Q ship, right? Q ship, I'm sure that anyone who's ever played a 4X game has tried to do this, realizing that their starting ship's really small. It's like, I could fit way more guns on a freighter, and it's a terrible idea by default, because freighters just have, like, no hit points whatsoever, but we could do that. Let's build a Q ship, just for the sake of building a Q ship. These are the weapons I've currently got available: bombs, tactical nuclear bomb bay, flak turrets, scatter flak, and point defense Vulcan cannons. Now, in this case, I can't actually turn this into a Q ship, which is interesting because some of the other races allow you to turn these into Q ships, because all of these modules are internal. See here? That means I means internal, E means engine, O means outside, outer, and IO means both. So in this case, you can only put these weapons, there are some exceptions to this, on the outside of the ship. So I cannot build a Q ship using this, which is quite kind of surprising. I go to platforms here, and this is a space-based platform. Let's say if I want to build a platform. All right, how do I do that? Well, I can't fit a scatter flak turret because that's actually 3 for 3. So if you can't fit it in this block, then it ain't going to go there. That, on the other hand, will fit, as you can see. So I could put that there, I could put that there, and I could put that there. And you can even customize the firing arcs on it, which is kind of neat. Can't do that, however. There we go. So just get over here. Just, there we go. It's a little bit clunky at times. So I can rotate these firing arcs, and just there. They really need to make that easier. He needs to make that easier. So I have 3 flak turrets on this platform here, and I've angled them roughly in a way that will allow them to fire at all angles, which is always nice. Covers all possibilities. These are, these are pretty good for defending systems. They're good for delaying ships and fleets that arrive while you get your ships to respond to it. This needs to be powered, so the power system actually uses an area of effect, as you can see. If I put a small nuclear reactor here, it's got enough power to reach this area here, but it doesn't have enough power to reach here. So that's going to be a bit of a problem. If I put a medium nuclear reactor in the center, which is clearly what this is designed for, then all of these 3 weapons and everything on the outside here will be powered. Now, this stuff, obviously, we need some kind of ordnance to actually hold this in place. Otherwise, it's not going to fire for a long time. It's only got an ordnance capacity of 48, and these flak turrets, I think, fire 3 ordnance each. So we could load that up, and, that could be the basic one. That could be it right here. So that's got 248 ordnance capacity, and it's got 3 big cannons on it, and 2,400 total hit points. Now, if I had researched armor, for instance, I could apply armor to this thing instead, which would mean it would last a little bit longer. You could even potentially fit a small shield generator on there, and so on and so forth. The power system is interesting because there's also something called a power conduit. This can, let's just say, I decided to put this here. I was like, this sucks, this is a bad idea. But I can build a power conduit down there. Suddenly, I have 2 more spaces to play with because of that power conduit. That power conduit carries the power down into the rest of the platform, and it's close enough for these 2 to be powered. So I have 2 more internal spaces. Since I don't need any more power than this to power what's on my ship, that's actually fine. I could just run off a single nuclear reactor, and then I could maybe fit in 2 more ordnance spaces, or I could make it a little bit tougher. 2 more internal bulkheads. That takes it up to 3,000 total hit points. Pretty tough. There we go. So I could make this platform base, and there's a bunch of default designs here that you can use, which are kind of handy. And also, the designs that you make will actually be used by the AI in other games, which I find really neat. Admittedly, it also means you completely screw the AI over when it's building completely awful ships, but hey, It's pretty cool to fight against something big and scary that you made in the previous game. I like that a lot. So this is a flak platform. Let's learn to spell, thank you very much. And I can now build that. And that's pretty much it. I will show you later on in the video a somewhat larger ship, because as you might imagine, if that's what it takes to build a small platform, building something huge like a carrier or a space station takes a while. But this modular-based construction is really kind of fantastic. I can't really do it justice by showing you something like a platform, because you can do all sorts of really cool stuff, like putting armor around the outside, putting guns on one particular side of the ship, and then ordering the ship to fire a broadside from the left side only. You can have the ship rotate to show its less damaged side. You can do a lot of cool stuff with the ship design and the actual combat, and that's really the core, the meat of the game, the thing which really makes it stand apart from everything else. A game like Galactic Civilizations 2 lets you customize the look of a ship, but Stardrive lets you customize to a ridiculously in-depth degree how the ship actually runs, which is very, very cool. Alright, let's get out of the ship design and back into this. So I'm going to start producing some Wisp fighters. Just these kind of basic ships. They have 3 Vulcan cannons on them. They're pretty, yeah, they're decent. They're basic as all hell, but they're decent. They can fight. Now, I sent my flagship over in this direction, as you can see. It's going to take a little while to get there. We're going to travel quite the way because I detected an ultra-rich area here. What I want to do after that is start to construct freighters. The reason I want to do that is because guess what you can't do on a desert planet very well? That's right, grow food. So you can import and export food and production using a fleet of transport ships. Most of this is automated, it's really quite elegant. So if I were to build a bunch of transports, which I'm going to do, I'm going to build 5 Draylock transporters. And hopefully once I've colonized, these things will be up and running. I can then start to bring food in. And using my governor options, if I want to automate this world, which I don't because it's my core world, I want to micromanage it myself, I can tell it what to do. If I pick industrial, it's going to prioritize industrial production, it's going to import food, but it's going to export production. That's what it does. I could pick military world here, I can do agricultural. Agricultural is, of course, the opposite of that, or I can assign labor directly by using these sliders. So right now, I don't really need to produce a huge amount of food. But I am going to grow a bit, so I'm going to keep it at 1 for the time being. My aeroponics should research and finish at some point. And as you can see, that's what I assigned to research, that's what I assigned to production. So I'm building my Wisp fighters. I've got 1 already finished, and that's actually going to go in orbit around here. You can zoom all the way in. That's what it looks like. Isn't it adorable? Yes, indeed it is. Alright, very cool. I should really start to use this max zoom out thing. Haven't really been doing much of that lately. I'm going to set that back to warp because I accidentally took direct control of my flagship, which was kind of silly. Now, once I've built a few ships, I'm going to show you something really neat. This is a pretty fantastic piece of functionality that this guy put into this game, and that's the idea of fleet control, which makes dealing with hundreds of ships extremely easy, as well as reinforcing fleets that have taken damage, which I like a huge amount. Now we're going to go to Termendalf here, and this may give me an opportunity to show you some combat. I would be very surprised if this wasn't defended. Turns out that it's not. Sweet. Okay. No big deal then. This is not actually defended by remnant ships, so we're going to grab that. What's going on over here? This is an interesting area by the looks of it. That has an oceanic world. Useful. It also appears to have some kind of anomaly on it, as you can see, and this could be all sorts of things. It could be an artifact, it could be some strange alien mine or whatever. Anyway, we're going to colonize this world. The colonization ship is moving into position. It'll, of course, consume the ship, and it will take over this world. And then what we'll want to do is immediately set it to import food, because it's not going to get all that far on sand. There we go. And there it is, colonized. So this area is ultra-rich. I want it to be an industrial world. So we're going to focus on production. We're going to import our food. And first things first, we'll probably want to make sure we can get a spaceport up there, but I imagine it's going to build that up automatically for me there, so no big deal. I'm going to send my starship off somewhere else. Let's go have another look through the list of areas. What we could do with is grabbing a really good agricultural world, but it doesn't appear that there is one. Looks like my main world, which happens to be an oceanic... Actually, no, Angbadang 1 is not my main world. That's handy. There's actually a planet in my very solar system that could enable me to produce a lot of food there. So I'm going to set it to colonize, and then Angbadang is going to construct a new ship, and then it's going to colonize that. That's always nice. What else is there? We could look for big worlds, max population. Lapis 5 is a big world. It's not very good at anything else, but if I want to dump a lot of people there, it's probably not a terrible idea. So let's set to colonize there as well. Sweet. Then it kind of just rolls on. We're just waiting for our first piece of research to actually finish. I'd love to show you combat. I'm going to have to go and actually... Interestingly, the Kulrathi are over there by the looks of it. I could send my flagship in there and we can go make some first contact, which will also let me show you the diplomacy screen. And in the meantime, I'm going to recruit myself an agent because we might be spying very soon. First things first, I'm going to train it immediately. Spend a lot of money to get your agent up to level 10, and it makes it way, way more likely that you'll actually be able to do anything with it. So this is going to be an agricultural world. As you can see, this is oceanic, which means that half of this stuff I can't colonize, but that's going to change. Hey, samurai space bears! The Kulrathi Shogunate, one of the races in the game. Anyone who played Master of Orion 2 just probably had a giant nostalgia-gasm, and the reason they did is because these sort of animated screens were very much part of Master of Orion. These are nice and high-res and very, very nicely put together. Also, each of these races has a very distinct personality, which actually works within the way that the game actually operates for diplomacy. These guys, they really, really hate it when you're dishonorable. Because, hey, you know, they're samurai space bears. And then there's another race which are basically robotic, that are very, very hostile, unless you sort of supposedly override their probability circuits. Like, they will usually decline everything unless you give them something which is really, really valuable, and then they'll, oh, just a piece of tech, and they say, yeah, it's worth taking this risk because of that. So they act very robotically, and they also act very aggressively as well. If you show even a hint of weakness, then they will try and take you over. These guys, on the other hand, very, very honorable space warrior bears. There are a bunch of other different races that act in different ways, which is really quite nice. Alright, what can we do with them? Well, we can have a discussion with them, and you can find out different pieces of information. How do you hold your sword without any thumbs? Indeed. There's a little bit of a sense of humor to it. You can also propose to join to a federation, which is just ridiculous. Do you have any grievances with us? These guys actually talk in poetry, which is really quite nice. None of us doesn't look like... How do they already have armor theory, heavy fighter hulls, and military outposts? That's pretty impressive. I want that stuff. But I don't really have anything that I can give them. For some reason, it doesn't actually allow you to pay for stuff, which is really odd. I can trade colonies, but I can't trade money, which is really weird. It would be nice just to be able to buy technologies from people, but you can't do that. It scratches my head as to why. We could propose a non-aggression pact, but they're not going to do that. Trust is earned, not freely given, so they will eventually perhaps learn to trust me, but since I intend on actually fighting them, that seems unlikely. We're just going to fight them for the sake of showing you what happens. Assuming they have any ships for me to shoot. Well, oh, there we go. There's a small transport. We could move and open fire on that transport. Just going to warp into range here. Oh, he's warped out. Never mind. It's pretty easy for them to kind of escape there. Whee! I believe this ship actually has lasers on it. Yeah, there you go. As you can see, because I moved into their space, they're not especially happy with me. And I think this ship has, for the most part, point defense lasers on it. There we go. So you can control that directly. Kind of handy, again. If you've got a big, valuable ship, then controlling it directly will most likely allow you to survive longer with it. But I'm going to warp out here. There we go. And off he goes. So... upsides and downsides of this game. Well, I'm going to load into a bigger game to actually show you the real meat of that, because it's hard for you to really determine how good or bad a game is if you play it from this stage, especially as a 4X game. So, let's load into my Wolfen Imperial game, which looks something like this. Please bear in mind, you're probably going to see very low frame rates, possible freezing, and I have no idea how long this is going to work for, because late game, this game tanks performance hard. It really, really does. Supposedly, according to the forums, there are issues with multi-threading, i.e. the game doesn't do it at all, so modern CPUs don't work all that well at the end game. It's like, I've got, what, 6 physical cores and 6 virtuals, and the game uses one of them, which is not that helpful at all, so the game has a tendency of slowing down. However, on the forums, the guy is saying that he wants to optimize that. So, let's go into something a little bigger. Yeah, this is a lot bigger. This is my empire right here in red, as you can see. I say frame rate's going to kind of drop all over the place here. That has a tendency of happening. And I have a lot of fleets as well. You want to see the size of a fleet? I'll show you a fleet. This is 9th Fleet. 9th Fleet is kind of large. Let's go to fleets and find exactly how large 9th Fleet really is. 9th Fleet is 105 ships. And it's missing a few because they got shot down, so I've ordered a requisition for new ships. If I have ships lying around that aren't in a fleet that actually fit in with the design of this fleet, then I will be able to requisition them instead of building them. The way that this fleet is designed is kind of like this. It's pretty dumb. You can actually arrange fleets in a very specific way. So I've got a repair frigate here, and then I've got a huge amount of my Type 2 Vulcan fighters, which are very, very dangerous. They're not exactly that great. They swarm. One of the traits that I have for this particular race is pack mentality, so if there's enough ships together, they'll all get a 50% boost to effectiveness, which is extremely good, in my honest opinion. So I build a lot of very small ships, and I have these large fleets of like 100, 200 ships, and they swarm. There's not a lot of strategy involved in it. I've got this ship is actually sitting there to repair. I have a repair cruiser, or is it a frigate? I think it's a frigate, and it's supposed to help out in this particular situation, but most of these guys are just like a huge amount of stacked up ships. Fleets are generally designed better than this. This is just something I dumped together. I think I've got a few fleets that don't suck. There we go. This one is more logically designed. This is First Fleet. This consists of mostly logistics stuff. I have logistics frigates that generate ordnance and repair frigates that send out repair drones. They can kind of take care of themselves, but they're designed to support 8th Fleet, which is my big battle fleet. These are very, very nasty frigates, and they're also supported by these torpedo cruisers here. I think I've got all sorts of fleets, actually. I've kind of lost track of what each fleet actually does, but they're all hotkeyed with Control 1 through Control 9, so fleet management's fairly easy. I love requisition is just fantastic. It really, really is. If I want to reinforce 6th Fleet, I've got 54 ships that could be reinforced to 6th. Admittedly, I need to know what 6th actually is. Apparently, it's a bunch of scout ships. I'm not really sure what was going on with this. I think I accidentally made this fleet for no apparent reason. Yeah, there we go. I can just assign a bunch of my current ships. I have so many ships in my empire that a system like this makes it extremely easy to handle. You can also just design, if I want just to design a core fleet based on an idea. Let's say I wanted to build these Werewolf-class battleships. These are kind of the pride of my fleet. I'm a big nerd when it comes to naming my stuff. I don't know what it is. I used to do it as a kid. I still do it now. It's just, why the hell should I care, right? If I wanted to make a fleet of 5 of these, maybe supported by logistical ships to repair it. Maybe I want a bunch of repair frigates to go along with them. Let's find repair frigates. There we go. Then I can set that up. No problem at all. It's fairly easy to do. If you want to make a large fleet, it seems kind of annoying because I think you just have to individually click every time you do it, which is really not optimal. Would be nice if they sorted that out. Maybe I want a screen of smaller corvettes or whatever. Maybe all of these are defaults. These are my missile destroyers. They are really, really nasty pieces of work. They're just designed to spam a huge amount of missiles in the general direction of anything that comes in. And then what I can then do is click requisition, and then my shipyards across the galaxy and my empire are actually going to build this fleet and bring it together, which is in itself just an absolutely wonderful thing to be able to do. This is not something that you usually see in games like this. It's really smart. There we go. There's actually a spare ship. I think I have one of my Werewolf-class battleships is actually just hanging around, blowing up star systems on its own, but I click build now, and there we go. And this is where they're being built from. This is going to be built from Mercury, this is going to be built from Vata 3, Harbor 1, and it's spreading out the production across the Empire. And as you can see here, these are the number of planets that I currently have. I can order them by production. This is like my big, heavy production planet. Chikari 1 is where I build most of my ships. It's pretty good, and it's well defended as well. You can see the amount of production that's actually available there. Huge amount. It's also generating a large amount of revenue from taxes. It does not really make its own food, yeah? It does have a vertical farm, which is quite nice. It generates some food in its own, but most of the food that this place actually requires is imported by a huge fleet, and I do mean a huge fleet of transportation ships. Alright, some fighting is going on here. I say fighting, more like massacring. We are currently engaged here at Kothlar 1, which I think is one of the home worlds of the big guys. Looks like we're engaging with the Draylocks. Pretty much everyone's declaring war on me at this point because they're just terrified of what I can do, so there you go. This area I just absolutely dominated. I'm going to try and find my big ship so that I can maybe make that my flagship and play around with it for you. Open ship list, look for roles. God, I have so many, it's ridiculous. Show all of my capital class ships. Well, there we go, I only have one currently. It's currently bombarding Thornton 1 by the looks of it. There it is. Yeah, it's currently in the process of bombing that planet. As you're gonna notice freezes here and there. I did say that this would happen at endgame. This is probably one of the biggest things that needs to be dealt with. Yeah, this is dead. You can kind of stop that now. Thank you very much. I could probably assign this as my flagship or whatever, but I actually have no idea how to do that. Maybe it's by the Q menu. There we go. Assume control. Sweet. So I could actually directly control this ship if I wanted. On its own, it's actually not that great because of the pack mentality trait, so this is not really... Ooh, hello. Sup. I have a feeling that's going to die very, very quickly. Hello! Oh my god. That is just unfair. This ship has a lot of guns. I think I've just fired a full salvo of capital class torpedoes right at that. Yeah, it didn't go well for it. Funnily enough, I think I actually took more hits there than anything else. What am I getting hit by? Half my stuff is exploding. I think I'm ramming into my own torpedoes, which is really not that helpful. I think I may have designed this ship incorrectly. It seems like it's shooting itself more so than anything else. Oh man, it is a bit monstrous. Well, there you go. Alright, let's talk about those 4 aspects that I was discussing earlier. Expand, exploit, explore, exterminate, not necessarily in that order. Exploration. Is there cool stuff to find? Some. You can find artifacts, you can find anomalies, and that in itself is pretty damn fantastic. But there aren't all that many events, which I found to be rather unusual. A little strange. You would think that there would be more in that regard. There are some events that happen every now and again, like Hyperspace Flux, which is definitely a classic. Everyone remembers that, I think, from Master of Orion and things like that. It prevents warping. And then there's stuff like pirates try to extort you, but I selected no on that one, and nothing happened. Like, I don't know if they tried to attack my homeworld, like it blew up by a dreadnought or something like that, but it was pretty dumb. There aren't all that many interesting events that happen, although, as I said, the anomalies do make worlds interesting to explore. Some of them can be bad, some of them can be good. I investigated a mine, which ended up with a bunch of antlions attacking me. Yes, I kid you not, there are antlions in the game. So, exploration it's decent, but I think there could be more, and I think it mostly comes down to the idea of simply having a lot more events. This guy is about to get absolutely wrecked, most likely, unless he flees. Looks like he's trying to turn around to get out of the gravity well, but those missile destroyers I was talking about earlier, yeah, this is what they do. They're kind of unpleasant. They fire a lot of missiles. The left side of that ship is about to melt, as is my CPU by the looks of it. This is the kind of thing that can happen, unfortunately. This is what I was talking about, these frame rate problems here and there. The only way to fix this, as far as I can tell, is to actually reload the game, which is really annoying. Like, save, and then exit to main menu, then load again. It's super irritating. As you can see, stability is not the strong point of this game, not by any stretch of the imagination. The beta of this game is very unstable. It is something that needs to be dealt with in a pretty major way. If this comes out running like this, then it will be an absolute must avoid at all possible. I mean, it's unfortunate, isn't it? It's a very, very hard kind of game to make. Yeah? It really, really is. They're very, very tricky to design. There's a reason why most people don't do it. But you do have to watch out for that kind of thing. This is another game that I was playing. It's pretty much failed. I believe I was on the verge of just getting annihilated by this race right here that are just absolutely huge. My empire is fairly pathetic. I have, like, 2 star systems that I control, and really that's about it. And then a other things that went wrong. Well, just the way that I set my empire up was completely wrong. I wasn't building enough freighters to do import and export and so on and so forth, so it wasn't working out. But this one shouldn't crash, at least that's the hope anyway. Good lord, I'm having to tax heavily to even keep my empire above water at this stage. Expanding, exploiting, expanding, as I said before, I was so rudely interrupted by the crashing. I love the interface. In fact, like, the game does a good job of macro management without turning it into a boring spreadsheet like Master of Orion 3, not Civilization, Master of Orion 3, which was an unequivocated disaster. It was just ridiculous. Not good at all. You can automate just enough to make this interesting. Yeah? So you can automate stuff like freighters, there we go, but just set small transport to small transport Mach 2s. I can't remember what I was using, warp transport Mach 2s. Small transport Mach 2s are the majority of my guys. You can refit all of your ships very, very easily without too much of a problem, although there are some strange things that you can't do as a group, like scrap multiple ships for some reason. I could refit all of these by doing this, and then that, and say I wanted to refit my small transport Mach 2s to warp transport 2s, refit all. But you can't scrap an entire class of ship. You've got to do that individually. The setting up of the fleets is a little bit finicky as well, so there are some elements to it, especially the fact that the UI is very, very small, that can be tricky. Now, I believe I was going to show you designing a larger ship. You want to see a larger ship? That's a cruiser. There are larger ships than that. Designing a cruiser takes a lot of work and a lot of time. You want to design a station, you end up in similar situations. I spent probably about half an hour to 45 minutes on this Battle Station Mach 1, which I assume is actually a terrible design. But it is loaded with weapons and shield generators and plating and things like that. It's got a massive cannon right there. It literally is a massive cannon. That's what it says. Bunch of multiple rocket launch systems aimed at all areas. This took a lot of design work because obviously you've got to do all the power. All of these little green spots are studded power plants all over the place. If I were to load up a design for one of my cruisers, for instance, the Emissary, that's what it looks like. I like to design symmetrically because that's just who I am, but I don't even know if this is even a good design. It's mostly reliant on shield generators. It doesn't have any armor plating, so I have a feeling that if it would take any direct hull hits on any side of the ship, we're going to start to see stuff disabled. But this thing is designed to obliterate anything from a long range before that even becomes an issue, and has potent shield power in order to try and deal with that. And designing this is an absolute joy, and this is like one of the biggest strengths of the game, is the design aspect of it. The ability to create ships with modules is what a lot of the game actually is. It's what a lot of the enjoyment of the game actually consists of. And that's great for me. I like tinkering with that kind of stuff. Not necessarily great for everybody, though. Always worth keeping that in mind. If you're not that kind of person, then there is no auto-design button. There are certain races, the humans apparently not being one of them, that have... Well, actually, no, there are some human things, like the Rocket Hunter, for instance. That is a default design here. I could just use this. Apparently, it's really bad, so that's actually awful. I would never want to use that at all. But you could use these default designs if you liked, but there is kind of no auto-populate. Kind of use the best weapons available, or generate me a ship based on this, that, and the other. So you can get a little bit bogged down in micromanagement as a direct result of that, but it's the kind of micromanagement that a lot of people are going to enjoy. I like it. This is the kind of micromanagement that I really, really like to do. Plasma throwers. Yes, yes. Big, big scary guns, and so on and so forth. But this is the strength of the game, and simultaneously one of its biggest weaknesses, because you will be bogged down in doing this, and you will probably spend a lot of time min-maxing every ship in your fleet, then refitting everything when you get a new piece of technology, and redesigning everything, and so on and so forth. To me, that's a joy. For some people, it won't be. The actual warfare element of it is pretty awesome, in my honest opinion. It's a nice, real-time setup, and you do have a surprising amount of control. Because of the ship design element, I feel that it makes it way, way more enjoyable than something like Sins of a Solar Empire. It's also way, way more dynamic. These ships have a tendency of moving in a more natural way. They don't just sit there shooting at each other. They swing left and right. They try to get arcs of fire. And since arcs of fire are such a big deal in this game, I haven't seen a weapon that has an arc of fire larger than 90 degrees. So these ships have to move in such a way that they can get the best possible arc of fire. And then you can give them orders, like, say... Oh, annoyingly enough, you can't seem to give them orders en masse. I think you can as a fleet, though. So, well, yeah, I'm almost certain you can. First fleet. Huh, maybe you can't. There we go. Yeah, you can do it in the fleet design screen for some reason. You can, like, this is move on, head on attack as a formation. If I want to have the emissary maybe just attack and sort of move to the left or the right and present only its right or left side, it can do that. And you can also switch it in combat, so you can micro, which is nice. There's a good amount of control involved there, especially using the Stardrive mechanic, because you are able to warp quite a lot, so you can actually jump out of combat quite easily. See, like that? There you go. So you can move individual ships out of combat and so on and so forth. It's pretty cool. Overall, diplomacy seems to be really good. Agent management is okay, although just a little bit fiddly in places. These are my agents here. They're trained up. Took a lot of doing. You have to just keep going back to agent training over and over and over again. You can't really queue it. There are a decent amount of options in terms of espionage. This is something that, of course, Endless Space completely forgot even existed, which kind of sucks. And I would strongly recommend that you utilize agents and espionage in this game, even if just to defend against other agents. They're pretty powerful. Stealing technology is probably the most powerful move that you can do. Inciting rebellions is pretty cool too, but obviously it takes a lot of work, and you can also sabotage and steal and things like that. So yeah, I'd say the espionage system is pretty robust, although you don't really have a lot of information to work with. Even infiltrating doesn't really tell me. It's like, how strong is this guy in terms of his espionage abilities? I have no idea whatsoever, because it just doesn't tell you, so hard to say, really. The only thing I will know is if he happens to have a modifier to it in his base race stuff, which he doesn't. But even then, how many agents does he have? How many ships does he have? It gives you these sort of smaller values here, like it has a good economic strength, military strength not so good, but it doesn't really give you any more specific information. Even infiltrating an area just kind of gives you vision. It doesn't really tell you any more than that. Also, the game seems to be lacking graphs and pie charts. Where the hell are all of those? The ability to analyze your empire is fairly limited as a result of not having that. I can't look at trends or anything like that because the game doesn't actually seem to have anything along those lines at all. So that's unfortunate. Tutorial-wise, I did view some of the tutorials, but a lot of things were kind of hard to understand. The tutorial videos are fairly lengthy and not particularly well set out, in my honest opinion, so it seems like they need some more context-sensitive stuff. There are a lot of tooltips available, but there's some stuff that really didn't make any sense, like, for instance, the construction of subspace projectors. That doesn't seem to be something that's covered anywhere, and in fact, you can actually automate it through the AI, which is... I didn't know that. I did not know that I could automate auto-building projectors. What do they even do? Well, they make movement faster in that area, so there's little platforms that kind of boost space. You can see they're now going to be built there. There's tiny little green outlines. They're going to start to build all of that up. So, overall, what do I reckon to it? I had a lot of fun with it so far until I ran into the technical problems. I think that's going to be its biggest stumbling block. And as a game, I don't see any massive, gaping, game-killing problems, aside from the technical issues. That has got to be resolved. Art style is really good. I love the attention to detail on the races, their various different personalities. The actual empire management is spot on. It's really nicely put together, with some limited exceptions. There are some things which are really fiddly, like, for instance, getting Marines to go and invade another planet is fiddly as hell. You have to right-click on each individual Marine on the colony screen to get them into orbit, then turn them into a fleet, then send them over there, then send them to orbit, and then click on a planet, then click on the tactical view, and then click troops, and then click land all. They could have made that a lot easier, but that hasn't really been dealt with yet. So there is a significant amount of clunk in the game, but nowhere near as much as you might think from a game with this kind of level of complexity. It is a very combat-focused and design-focused game. I think if you're looking for a more diplomatic game, you're probably not going to find it. The diplomacy is robust, but not in-depth. So the kind of diplomacy that you can do... Say we have words with him. You can discuss kind of the same 6 things. You can declare war, or you can negotiate some basic trades. And the trades are not, again, not really that good. It's just kind of technology, artifacts, and colonies. Those are the only things you can really trade. Then make non-aggression pacts, open borders treaty. There's not a lot of depth to this diplomacy system. Like, compare it to Sims of the Solar Empire's diplomacy expansion. Not even close. Not even close. Now, I do want to show you this, because this is kind of cute. Behold the owl locks. Yeah. There's even an achievement for liberating them from their slavery. Lot of character here. Lot of character. obviously a labor of love, I feel. And I think it's going to end up being really solid, from what I've seen. The problems I've got with it are, for the most part, technical ones, or things which could be easily fixed. It's minor systems problems here and there. Issues with overall management in certain aspects. Just a disparity between certain elements of the game and others, where it's like, oh, I can automate this, but I can't automate this, or I can do all of this as a group, and yet I can't do this as a group. Why? Who the hell knows? This is the kind of thing that needs to be resolved. And I think that's very fixable. And also, releasing modding tools very early on means this game has a ton of potential. But the technical issues have got to be sorted out. Obviously, it's about a month from launch, and beta is indeed beta, but those problems are game-killing. They must be fixed. It reminds me of trying to play Birth of the Federation way back in the day. What a crippling problem that was. It was a crying shame. I loved that game. But back in the day, it had such a large memory leak problem that it just got so slow later on. And this game has similar problems. Going to some battles, it tanks the game to 5 FPS and then just leaves it there. The game crashes, the game freezes, it stutters. This has got to be resolved. And if it doesn't get resolved, then that'll kill the game. Here's hoping that it doesn't, because I'm looking forward to playing this game once it comes out, and I'm looking forward to what the modding scene might provide. I think that, I mean, not just for one guy, this is just an impressive 4X in general. For one guy, it's beyond ridiculous. The fact that this even exists is insane. Obviously, he did a Kickstarter for this. He earned a lot of money to make it happen. He outsourced some stuff, but this guy knows his stuff. This guy knows what he wants from his game. And my hope is that he manages to realize his vision by the time it comes out, and that it doesn't get killed off as a result of technical problems. There you go, folks. Stardrive. Beta is currently available on Steam. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.